So after the last couple of weeks of playing Ajax, I realized that I have been playing Ajax completely wrong. The reason why I and probably a lot of Ajax players feel so weak right now is because we haven't really been taking advantage of what Ajax brings to the table, being the guardian that he is. So in today's video, I'm going to be solving all those issues all in one build. The build is capable of spamming tons of spells with really good sustain and able to absolutely decimate any mob in its path. And on the boxing side, we solve a big problem with Ajax with giving him the ability to give allies reliable defense as well as giving him really high firearm attack. And when played correctly, your firearm attack is even higher than Descendants like Glay. I perfected Ultimate Ajax. Let me show you how to build them. Alright, now before we jump into the build, I did want to say two things that is fairly important. I know some of you may skip parts of the video and it will be timestamped, but I have two things to say that's kind of important to this build. First off, I highly recommend you guys actually watch every part of the build through and through because there's multiple moving parts in the build and it will require multiple setups. As you can see here, I have two completely different setups for him and it will require you to be preset to be able to get this done. So it is important that you watch the entire video because it does have moving parts that's going to make you better. The other thing I wanted to say was the philosophy and the reason why I made this build. The reason why the build was made the way that I'm making it, which you'll notice a drastic change from previous videos and pretty much every video on the platform. The recent bosses that we're seeing in the game now devalues a lot of the things that my previous videos and a lot of the Ajax videos have now, which is stacking tons of defense and HP. In general, that playstyle wasn't even that great. That was more of a week one playstyle, drop body enhancement or whatever on your Ajax and your tanky. But the problem with that playstyle is, one, it doesn't bring value to your team, because at the end of the day, Ajax is a guardian that brings value to his team and body enhancement doesn't do that. And two, you can get defense from other things without hyper investing your Transcendent mod into it or multiple mods into it just to be tanky if you use Ajax correctly. And that's the big problem. I wasn't using Ajax correctly and it took me to master him to understand how to use him properly. The other thing behind the philosophy is I felt like me and many other players who were playing Ajax kind of felt like they were useless. And what I mean by this is when you're facing off against Gluttony, your defense means almost nothing to some degree. Yeah, you're probably going to take a little bit more hits, but outside of that, you don't really have much more value. Your offense is not great. Your defense is still not great because he's super strong. And your teamwork is not great either because you don't bring much value to your team. They don't want to stand in your shields because they're going to break the moment he shoots it one time. So the idea behind this build was to give you offense, give you defense, and make it so that you have value, that whenever you actually in a fight, you feel like you're contributing rather than just being this tanky guy that maybe can take a hit and kind of do nothing else. For what it's worth, when it comes to this build, you will have optimal defense despite what you see on the screen now, and I'll show you how to do it correctly. And then you'll have firearm attack comparable to Glay. Now that's not the whole story because Glay obviously have unlimited ammo and that makes her even more broken, but the point is your Ajax will be shooting on par with her firearm attack, and in a lot of cases you'll be dealing more firearm attack than Glay, which is pretty important. With the philosophy and the basic information out of the way, let's dive into my bossing build. And we have I want to go over how are we going to do this. We're going to go over the actual mods first. I typically go over the components, but you need to understand the mods first. So first things first, the newest addition to this build is Matrix Recomposition. This does a couple of things, but the main thing is it gives your team some survivability to allies. What that survivability is a defense increase by 50% for a certain duration. On top of that, whenever you use this when enhanced, this gives a ton of shield and it will also do shield regeneration over time. I'm going to quickly show you how it works. But as you can see here, right now we have 3,637 shield, and I know you're thinking, oh well, you have no shield, why are we building the shield? Well, when you press this will give you 12,800 shield, making you fairly tanky, and your shield is regenerating during this time, and your allies who are getting hit by this is also getting more shield and their shield is refreshed. For those of you who are concerned about the tankiness of this build, and you probably saw it in the thumbnail, whenever you're playing the game and you properly use your builds, you'll have 36,673 shield plus your HP plus 30,000 defense, and when you're enhanced properly, you'll be 36,000 defense with tons of shields, ton of HP. So defense will not be a problem. At the moment, the only boss that could in theory kill you would be Gluttony, and you would need to take like 2 shots, and you won't be using your shield properly if you die to Gluttony, basically. So if you understand how it works, you can always just cycle your shield and keep this shield buff up. You're not probably gonna do it like that. You're gonna probably do it over time because you can kind of keep it going, and we have mana sustain and things like that. You'll be playing pretty much, and you basically want to use your enhance around the time whenever you need it, and that's kind of something important. I think a lot of Ajax players don't really play around their enhance. And this will be like, if you're taking damage, you just proc that. If the boss is focusing you, just proc that. He's about to break it, the moment your shield break, proc it again, and you activate it and you stay alive, and you get way more value than just having like this arbitrary 50k HP that you can't even heal unless you pick up something on the ground. And that's the value of Ajax that a lot of players don't really recognize, that he has the ability to keep himself alive without needing a healer or anything like that, but it does require you to understand his kit. So we're using Matrix Recomposition. Now the way we're going to be complementing Matrix Recomposition is with Passionate Sponsor. What Passionate Sponsor does is whenever you buff an ally, is going to give you 7% firearm attack as well as skill power modifier, up to 75% of each of those things. And the way you can proc this is a couple of ways, and it's important to understand why we're doing this. And the thing about Matrix Recomposition is it has a 7-second cooldown, meaning generally speaking, if you're playing around your teammates, which you should, you'll be able to maintain this buff. When you come right out of spawn, that's already 3 buffs. And then by the time you get to the location, that's another like 3 buffs if your allies are staying close to you. Usually you'll be next to 2, or 1 go run off the screen and like get killed. And then you can drop your shield, which function as a buffer as well. So I'll show you quickly, and as you see here, that attack up is a buff. Quick tech for you guys: if you have a competent player on your team or someone you can communicate with, if they walk in and out of the shield, this will actually give you Passionate Sponsor. So I don't know if that's intended or a bug, but your teammates could do something like that to really help keep your uptime up. You can do it obviously because it's require you to buff an ally, but that's just something to note whenever you're playing this build. Continuing with the build though, what we're building here is built around making your Matrix Recomposition effective, which is range and mana efficiency. So what we have here is Agony. We have increased defense. These things are pretty important. Actually, the mana is actually pretty big. We'll talk about mana in a second because that's what this build really focuses targeting. We got increased defense, and then we have battle stamina for duration and HP, and then we have increased shields for maximum shields. Outside of that, we don't build any more into defense. In previous builds and in a lot of builds right now, you'll notice a lot of players build too heavy into defense, and that's a mistake in my opinion. Other than that, we have battle stamina. We have maximized conservation. We lose 20% skill power. We have maximized range. We lose 20% skill power modifier, but remember, Passionate Sponsor give us 75, and then shot focus also makes us lose another 15. So overall, we lose about 65, but we gain 75. So as a net, not like you're using skills to kill anyway, but as a net, you're going to have 10% increased attack on your skill power, and you have 75% attack whenever you're fully buffed, which the buff isn't that crazy to maintain with somewhat competent movement. The newest addition to the build is shot focus. You can only get this mod from combining. I've gotten it from combining C mods. Other people say you can do it just combining any mods. My way of getting it was with the C mod, but this will give you firearm attack, something that Ajax does a lot of and he needs a lot of help in getting. Now, the next thing that's super important is talking about the components, because these components are actually pretty integral to the build as well. So from the reactor, we're using a reactor that has duration and range. Duration has been helpful. Range has been pretty big. Honestly, I don't really see myself getting anything other than this, because to be honest, this is all I need to solve it. You don't really care about damage on the build itself when you're bossing, and so having that duration and range is actually pretty nice. So that's what we're using for this reactor. This reactor is not as important as the mobbing reactor. For our set, we're using the Frozen Heart set. Now this is a set you see on almost no Descendant. I don't think any Descendant uses this set. And this is a very good set, and it synergizes really well with Ajax. Just to rip the band-aid off for those of you who are wondering where you get it from Frostwalker. You're gonna have to face off against Frostwalker and get a good set. I spent the last couple of days fighting him and stuff, and again, we should be comfortable enough right now that we can kill him. Just be aware you need to farm Frostwalker. It is what it is. So what this set does is it grants you some sniper crit and scout rifle crit. That's not really important, but what's important is the buff. Whenever you grant a bonus to allies, this is going to give you Frozen Heart energy. After getting 4 Frozen Heart energy, you'll get the buff Frozen Heart Essence, which will give you firearm weak point damage, as well as skill crit hit, which is not that important, and then firearm crit hit rate for 10 seconds, giving you more damage with your firearms, being that Ajax is a firearm user. Now, one thing that's important, Passionate Sponsor can proc this, but it's a little hard to do it. Like, you need to get like 2 within the 10 seconds to be able to proc it, because that thing kind of goes away. So make sure you do that. But the other thing is your shield, if your allies stand in it, it can proc it too. So if your allies just run into it and then you press your shield, your expulsion, you instantly get the benefit. And that's kind of what I was saying at the very beginning, where you kind of like put this on allies and then you build your void explosion at the end, right before the boss fight starts, because you'll be like this pretty much. You just hit them with the shield and they'll stand in it, boom, you instantly get the buff. Because most of your teammates will probably go to the shield because it's big and they want to, stay protected. And yeah, that's how you would do that to get that bonus, and you'll be firing, if you're doing it correctly, basically. If you're doing it correctly, out to spawn, you hit them with that. As you're running, you hit them with it again. Once you get to the location, you hit them again, and then you press your Z, and you have 10 Passionate Sponsor buffs, and you have the firearm buff from this, because the shield itself gives you a firearm buff, and then you'll have a buff from your Frozen Heart energy and everything all at once, and you'll be shooting pretty damn hard, dealing a good amount of damage. Of course, you can't always like maintain this. That's the caveat of being an Ajax player, but that's the design of the build. So hopefully you guys, you understand how the bossing build works. If you have any questions specifically pertaining to the bossing build, I'll be sure to try to help you. Let's go over the components though. We have HP and fire resistance. You can go something else other than fire resistance is not needed. You're tanky enough that resistance don't mean anything, but that's the best I got. For this piece specifically, you need MP recovery in combat, and if you want to make the build much smoother, max MP is actually pretty big. I would argue the biggest thing you can get on these components is defense on this one, and MP recovery in combat. Max MP on this one. These two are really big if you can do that, because my mana pool is pretty good, but with another 150, like, mana will never be a problem. You'll be super efficient no matter how far the fight goes along, and even if you don't pick up like one of those little like balls that give you like mana, you'll still be able to sustain because of the mana regen and how efficient the build is, which is important because you're using that skill a lot. Like, you're using this skill every 11 seconds to maintain your buff, or if your allies are standing in your enhanced shield, you can kind of save on mana a little bit, but you're kind of trying to maintain that buff as much as possible, and having mana actually helps a bit. Down here we have the defense one. I use mana recovery modifier because mana is actually the thing we need to solve for the most. And then finally we're using a toxic resistance max shield. You can go like shield regeneration stuff over the resistance. It's just the best I got, but for the most part, this is what you're aiming for when you're going for this build, and you definitely want to go kill Frostwalker and get it done. Now that we're done with the bossing build, let's go over the mobbing build, which will have a completely different set of items. So let's apply this preset and go towards it with, and we're gonna be using the Secret Garden. So Secret Garden, I guess we'll lead with Secret Garden here. This is a weapon I made a build on recently. I'll have that in the card in the top right and linked down in the description. I'm gonna lead with Secret Garden because that's really important to the mobbing build. So what does Secret Garden do? Well, one, it got a massive buff that gave it 50% base firearm, crit chance. So it has a 50% crit chance. It used to be 35, which is absolutely insane. It has a pretty good crit multi of 2.25, and it's a burst weapon that does some really good damage. The unique ability is built around dimensional and tech. This is a weapon that is specifically meant for anyone who have these two benefits, and you actually have both of them, which is great. What the dimensional side does is whenever you cast a dimensional skill, you have a chance to trigger custom resource. Custom resource for Ajax is his void energy. This is fine, but you don't care about it that much. What you care about more, so from a mobbing perspective, is the pest control. I still have to build 2 more Secret Gardens. One is crafting right now. But at max, what this does is it gives you 50% trigger rate. and it has a duration of 9 seconds. You can get up to 3 stacks, which will give you firearm attack and skill power. And this is actually pretty significant. You actually start to do a lot of damage. The reason why this is important is because we're using Void Explosion. What Void Explosion does is it does nonsense with your sub attack. Is terrible. They need to like work on that. But the main thing is it keeps this skill to gives it like 2 charges, and it makes it a tech skill because a lot of his altering things make them dimensional, and it maintains the tech, which works really well with pest control, meaning you actually end up having some decent like damage. On top of that, it has some good uptime, has a 5-second stat count, and then with the way the build is set up, we're going to make that almost a non-existent cooldown, but we'll go over that in just a second. In terms of how I'm building the secret garden, we're building it with rifle and reinforcement, action and reaction, better insight, skill priority, better concentration, fire rate up, mental focus because sharp precision shot doesn't work, expanded weapon charge, insight focus, do not use edging shot, it is not good, and then use electric enhancement or the other ones. You have to level them to 12 because you cannot fit this in without it, because these slots are all different like little signs. You have to use 12. They need to make this universal. I will say this in every video until they do it. But yeah, you have to level it to 12. You can put weak point here too if you want to, but I like elemental. I think it's better damage. For our reactor, we're going to be using a materialized reactor once again that has tech scaling and a secret garden mounting. That's actually really important. Like, make sure you have that 160% or at the very least 140%. Do not have that. It is really big on the damage because we don't actually scale damage as much, but we still do a good amount of damage, as you probably saw in the preview or if I cut it into the video at this part. The substats we're looking for is skill cooldown cost. Actually, we're not looking for that. You can go damage on that. You don't even need that. Like, maybe cooldown's fine, and maybe even a little cost. It kind of depends. I don't really have cost problems. So maybe you can go like more offensive stuff, but this is maybe the best I have right now. But that one's a little bit up to you. You can go range, crit, stuff like that. You know, tailor it yourself. And then we have the Slayer set. The reason why we're going Slayer set is very simple, because it gives us skill costs, which is going to make the cost more, but it's going to give us a lot more damage. And that's really important to this build because, well, we are very mana efficient with the build, so it doesn't matter. We want more damage on our skills. That's all that really matters for this type of build. We're using MP recovery out of combat. That's actually really big, by the way. That's really good for whenever those phases where they're not spawning, because this is a mobbing build, right? Remember, this is the mobbing build. We don't care too much about defense, even though we have really good defense, 37k defense and 12k HP. We got great defense, even more so. It's just because it's a set. That's why it's just such a good set on stats. But it has really good mana recovery on this, and I think that's actually really big, because in between times where you're facing off against bosses or like mob spawning, you'll be able to regen a ton of mana, and it regenerates super fast, and it actually helps with your mana sustain even more. We got max HP because we got it. For the Slayer sensor, I think this is actually really good too. Max MP, having a good base max MP like we have now, 338, is really big for the build. Like, it's going to really help your mana sustain. I actually haven't played the build. Like, all the footage you're seeing is without this. I just got this before making this video, and it's only going to make you way more mana efficient. I have very little, very little instances where I run out of mana after spamming constantly, and with this will make it so that never happens. So it's really big. We're using a memory that has defense and electric resistance. You can kind of do whatever you want with this, doesn't really matter. And then for this one, we have shield recovery modifier as well as max shield, which is super good for the build as well, because we do lean into shields just a little bit, not as much as the like bossing build, but a little bit. Let's go over the modules. Again, I already told you we're using Void Explosion. You guys know that one. We're using Kicking, Nimble Fingers, Amplification Control for skill range, because we want to slam the entire screen. That's the reason for this. And the max shields actually go a really far way with it. I really love shielding. I think shielding is very powerful and something Ajax players need to embrace. Shielding is super good on him. He has great shielding synergies. Time distribution, because cooldown, and max HP, because we want him to be a little tanky because he's going to be in the fray. MP collector is something we're going to be using, and MP collector gives you mana sustain. This is one of our bigger mana sustaining things. Multi-talented is super good. You probably saw some of my gameplay, and I'll just like kind of reenact it. What multi-talented does for this build specifically is it makes it so that whenever you use it, it gives you a cooldown on your abilities. So as you can see, they have cooldown down, and it's gonna pretty much make it so everything is really like cooldown efficient. And as long as you're using have the swiftness buff, you'll be able to just constantly spam your abilities, and you just gotta like cycle it smart. But you'll have mana sustain from killing, by the way. Obviously I can't maintain it hitting nothing, but you'll be able to pretty much maintain it. And maybe you can even see like out of combat mana. Let's say you're out of combat, your mana is going up really quickly, as you can see there, and by the time another group spawns, the little mana that you may have lost if you didn't get the proc, or you didn't get a pickup, or you didn't get anything mana related, then you'll be able to, you know, get some mana back, and it'll be really nice. So I'm glad you could see that. Multi-talented, the rest of it doesn't matter too much. Like if you do end up triggering a tech skill, you'll get skill range and skill power modifier, so it kind of helps regardless. So you'll actually deal damage if you like mess up and you do the tech skills first. So that's actually really nice. We're using frugal mindset because we want to be a little bit cost effective, and most importantly skill range, we want to hit the whole screen. Increase HP to stay alive, skill expansion for more range, increase defense, which again I do think 1 defense is always good. And then we're using weigh the scales for more shields and more skill costs. Oh, now I wanted to show you guys quickly the same thing with the shield tech. You can kind of do it too, but again, this is you're more reliant on your HP than you're more on your shields with this build. But regardless, your leap will give you some shields on top of your pretty high defense, and you end up having like 6k shields, 12k HP, and then like 40k defense. So like, and we're mobbing. Remember, this is a mobbing build, so you don't care about nothing's killing you. And if you're using the shield tech correctly, like nothing ever breaks your shield, so that's really important. All right, and there you have it, guys. That is my perfected ultimate Ajax build. Honestly, I'm really happy this build is like where is at right now. I put a lot of effort into it, really trying to think about the future of the game, making sure that you guys have a build that actually really works for, like, you know, like not just something that you throw together quickly like a lot of the builds that are out right now, and even my previous builds, but a build that has sustainability. And I think this is going to be one of those more sustainable builds that you want to build in the future and right now, because it actually gives you tons of damage and tons of value that I think Ajax really lacked right now. Anyways, I don't know if I'm going to be doing too many more updated Ajax videos. Maybe there'll be one sometime in the future if I get the experimental tab working. Yeah, for now, that's going to be it for Ajax for the most part, with some tweaks maybe here and there. Expect to see some other Descendants. Feel free to leave some requests down in the comment section. I'll be sure to, like, you know, read them all. And hopefully you guys really liked the video. If you do appreciate a creator who, like, genuinely wants to give you guys good content and give you good builds that's going to be good for the longevity, not just the short-term views, consider leaving me a like as well as subscribing to the channel. Gonna be here for a long time covering the first Descendant, and helping a creator like me I think will be more healthy for the community. Thank you once again, guys, for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one very soon.